Hello, welcome to the channel Y Stories. Enjoy watching.
The loud thunder woke Viola Sans up. The woman opened her eyes. Raindrops were beating on the window pane. May storm, she thought. The last month of spring had been dry and hot, so the rain was a welcome sight. Viola pulled back the curtains to admire the rain, washing away the dust from the fresh, young leaves. Heavy gray clouds hung over the courtyard of the house where she had lived for over a year. She glanced down. In the rain-deserted courtyard stood a large black car, and next to it were three men. Two of them were dressed in all black. The third, the one on the right, wore jeans and a white sweater. He was staring at the windows of the apartment building, as if searching for someone. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Viola Sans hurried to the hallway, but Katerina preceded her. The mother of many children was already awake, preparing breakfast for the large family. Katerina, someone has come for Viola's grandmother. Come quickly, there's such a car, and those men look serious. They gave me some coins. Wait, who has come? What men? Katerina interrupted the boy. I don't know. They said to ask for Viola. They seemed to be looking for her. Pedro showed the coins to the woman. Viola looked at Pedro in surprise. She hadn't been expecting anyone, and she was certain that nobody was looking for her. Katerina turned to the elderly woman and asked, "Do you understand anything?" "Absolutely nothing, Katerina," Viola replied. "But there really is some kind of car out there, and there are strangers with it." "All right, stay here, and I'll go see and find out what's going on," Katerina decisively said, putting on her shoes and throwing on a light cardigan over her bathrobe. She exited the apartment, closing the door behind her, and headed down the stairs, with Pedro following closely behind. Viola was born in a small town, in an ordinary family. Her childhood was not much different from that of her peers. Most of the male population worked at the metallurgical plant, the only large enterprise in the town. Viola's father was also a metallurgist. Sancho Sans married Nadia Iglesias, Viola's mother, right after returning from military service. They had loved each other since their school days, dreaming of a large, happy family. However, it turned out that after Viola's birth, Nadia could no longer conceive, and Sancho wanted a son, or even better, several sons. His dissatisfaction with his wife and his resentment that she could not give him heirs occasionally erupted into scandals. He would get drunk and shout, "You're worthless, an empty vessel. What good is this girl to me? She's just as clueless as you are." Nadia had no education and worked at the post office. Her domestic duties included taking care of her daughter and husband. When Sancho had fits of rage, she tried to calm him down by fetching another unopened bottle from a hidden place. She always had alcohol hidden away so that she could pour her husband a drink in time, preventing him from causing trouble. Sancho would drink himself to sleep. Then, Viola's mother and Viola herself would calmly go to sleep in Viola's room. Viola's performance in school was average, shifting between getting C's and B's. However, Nadia always told her daughter that she must go to college and get an education. "You won't get by without a profession these days, my daughter," her mother would say. "You can become a hairdresser, a cook, or even a seamstress, but you must know how to work." Nadia hoped that Viola would be her support in old age. She was the only one left, and there was no one else to rely on. Her husband had a tough, harmful job. Who knew how much longer he would last, especially since he was already ill and drank excessively. At the age of 16, Viola became pregnant. She managed to hide it for several months, but when her belly noticeably rounded, she had to confess to her mother. Nadia, trembling with fear, told her husband. The shouts and cursing of Sancho could be heard throughout the house that evening. He yelled so loudly that the walls shook and the dishes rattled in the cupboard. "You little brat! I'll shake everything out of you right now, your illegitimate child, and all the nonsense from your head." He stormed through the apartment, threatened his daughter, and, in his anger, threw things around. "You've brought disgrace upon us. What will people say about us now? That Sancho has a daughter who's nothing but trouble. Sancho, calm down. Our daughter shouldn't be nervous now. Nadi tried to pacify her husband. Oh, she shouldn't? But she can have fun with men? He yelled, undeterred. Get out of here, woman. I'll teach her a lesson right now. No, Sancho. Don't touch our daughter. I'll take her to the doctor tomorrow and sort everything out. Nadi went to the cupboard, where a bottle of vodka was hidden beneath neatly folded bed linens. She took out a shot glass, placed it loudly on the table, and poured a drink. Drink up, Sancho, and calm down. The father drank the glass in one gulp, and Nadi poured another. She knew that her husband would calm down once he had a drink. Maybe he wouldn't beat Viola. She couldn't bear the thought of taking her pregnant daughter to the doctor with bruises. She was underage and already in such a state. Viola and Nadi left the maternity clinic in silence. Both of them wondered what would happen now. The pregnancy was too far along, and the doctor refused to perform an abortion. She gave Viola a medical record and instructed her to undergo tests. When the gynecologist asked about the father of the unborn child, Viola replied that he didn't exist. Actually, I am obligated to report this to the police and Child Protective Services. This is a serious matter, the doctor said sternly. And for that, you need to tell me who did this to you. He doesn't exist. He was just passing through town and left. I don't know where he went, Viola replied. But at least you know his name and surname, don't you? Where is he from? Viola remained silent. She lowered her head. All right, the doctor said, realizing she wouldn't get anything more from the girl. Go ahead and get your tests done. Come back for your appointment in a week. Her parents couldn't sleep at night. They were filled with worry. Meanwhile, Viola seemed obsessed. She sewed blankets from scraps of fabric stored in her mother's closet and knitted little sweaters and booties from leftover yarn. The girl, who had already been an average student, stopped studying altogether and frequently skipped classes, complaining of feeling unwell. Her thoughts were solely consumed by the baby. You've completely lost your mind, daughter, Nadi scolded. Children should be born out of love in a proper family. This isn't a doll, not even a kitten or a puppy. A child requires not only love but also resources. How do you plan to raise it? Everything will be fine, Mom, was Viola's only reply. Viola's baby decided to be born long before the due date. She gave birth to a boy in the 8th month of pregnancy. From the onset of contractions until the baby was born, Viola's parents stayed in the maternity ward, waiting for their daughter to give birth, and they didn't leave her side. I hope everything is okay, Nadi prayed. Enough with the whining, Sancho abruptly interrupted her. Be thankful at least that she won't flaunt her belly and that our neighbors won't have a reason to talk about our daughter and shame us in front of everyone. Where have you seen such a thing? When the doctor came out to speak to the parents, both Sancho and Nadi rushed to her. Well, how's our daughter, doctor? Nadi asked, worried. Your daughter has given birth, the doctor began. Before she could finish her sentence, Viola's father took her by the elbow and led her aside. I need to talk to you urgently, he insisted, his expression determined, and the midwife didn't even attempt to argue. If you say so, then let's go to my office, she said. Nadi started to follow them, but her husband stopped her. Wait here, he said. I'll be back soon. The bewildered woman remained standing in the middle of the waiting area. She was angry that her husband didn't let her talk to the doctor. It was true what they said, men were incapable of showing empathy and understanding in situations they knew nothing about. They didn't give birth themselves, they didn't know what it was like to carry and deliver a child. When her husband reappeared in the doorway, Nadi practically jumped out of her seat. What's going on, Sancho? What did the doctor say? She asked. She child is sick, it was born prematurely, what can I say? He replied. What? Thaws it, Nadi. Maybe he won't survive at all. What do you mean, won't survive? "Oh, dear Lord, how can this be?" Sancho's wife lamented. "What is going on?" "Enough, quiet down. Let's go home," her husband said, pulling her by the hand. "We're not needed here for now. Viola is asleep. They gave her a sedative." Back at home, Sancho sat down at the kitchen table with a bottle of strong liquor. He hardly spoke to his wife, only drinking and occasionally nibbling on a salty salad. The next day, after work, Viola's parents hurried back to the maternity ward. They needed to arrive before the doctor left. Seating Nadi on a chair in the waiting area, Sancho said, "Sit here, I'll find out everything myself." He headed down the corridor to the head doctor's office. His wife waited for him for nearly half an hour. Sancho returned, visibly upset. He punched the wall in frustration and dragged his wife outside. "The baby died," he said. "How could he?" Nadi couldn't comprehend. "Are you daft?" "Normally. He was premature and sick, and he died. That's it." Sancho's wife's behavior irritated him. He just wanted to leave the maternity ward and have a drink. There was an open bottle in the fridge at home. "Wait, Sancho, where's the death certificate? Will they give it to us?" Nadi suddenly asked. "They'll give it when we come to pick up our daughter. Come on already." The man headed towards the exit, and Nadi followed him. At home, the woman let her tears flow freely. She felt sorry for the baby, sorry for her daughter, and sorry that she and her husband didn't become grandparents. She knew that despite Sancho's scolding, complaints, and constant displays of dissatisfaction, deep down, he loved Viola and loved his grandson just as much. "We must bury the baby properly," Nadi thought. She worried about what her daughter must have already been told, that her baby didn't survive. Tears were streaming down her face. "Pour some for me too, Sancho. Let's toast to our departed grandson." The woman placed another shot glass on the table. 2 days later, Viola's parents picked her up from the maternity ward. She was pale, thin, and exhausted. Viola didn't cry. She stood silently beside her parents, waiting for her belongings to be brought out. "Go get the document, Sancho," Nadi asked her husband, "and ask when they'll give us the body for the funeral." "I know, I'll go now," the man replied gruffly. He left, and when he returned, he said, "Let's leave here quickly." "What happened?" Nadi asked, taking the bag with her daughter's things from her husband's hands. "Nothing. I said, let's go." "No more questions," he insisted. "So, I got really angry with them and lost my temper," Sancho said. It was evident he was angry. "They don't want to give us the body. They said it's not allowed." As they left the hospital, Sancho walked briskly down the sidewalk, while Viola and Nadi tried to catch up with him. "Why is it not allowed?" Viola asked. "How should I know?" "Those are their rules," Sancho replied. "What about the death certificate?" "They should give that to us," Nadi said, still not understanding. "They gave it to me." Sancho stopped and turned to his wife. "They gave me the certificate. But I got so furious about them not releasing the body that I tore it up and threw it in the doctor's face." "Oh, Sancho, why are you so rough?" "You should have asked calmly," Nadi said. "How can you talk calmly with them? They killed the kid, my grandson, and then they have the audacity to say it's our fault for raising our daughter poorly." "I just couldn't hold back," Sancho responded. Back at home, Viola locked herself in her room and refused to come out, no matter how much her mother pleaded with her. In her head, she could hear the cries of the baby she had given birth to. She heard it clearly, as if the baby were lying right beside her, crying. Viola managed to finish school, but now she was the subject of mockery. Her classmates treated her with disgust and didn't want to associate with her. It was understandable. Her classmates were looking forward to their future, believing that everything was going according to plan. Soon, they would receive an education, find jobs, and then build wonderful family relationships, everything as it should have been. For Viola, things were different. She was already in a relationship with a man who didn't love her at all, and she felt no affection for him either. Nobody knew who had impregnated her, not even her parents. Moreover, Viola had experienced the challenges of carrying a child to term. She never became a mother, and on top of that, she, already not very social, withdrew even further into herself, becoming a gloomy shadow. Every time Viola returned from school, she felt the eyes of the neighbors in the courtyard on her. Not everyone looked at her with disdain. Some women, pushing strollers, would lower their gaze when they saw Viola and quickly avert their eyes. They were afraid to even imagine what the young, would-be mother was feeling. They were afraid to put themselves in her shoes, if only for a moment. After all, in their strollers were living, healthy babies, while Viola's child had died. Over a year passed. Viola's mother hoped that her daughter's emotional wounds would gradually heal and that she would return to her former self. But something inside Viola seemed broken. She had bent under the weight of her suffering. No matter how much Nadi urged Viola to attend the graduation party, her daughter adamantly refused. She only went to school to pick up her report card, which was filled with mostly failing grades, and then returned home. A week later, Viola found a job as a cashier in a supermarket. She refused to consider enrolling in college. Her father now drank every evening. When he returned from work, he sat at the kitchen table and demanded a bottle and a glass. Nadi no longer even noticed how automatically, on her way home from work, she would stop by the store to ensure they always had something to drink at home. Otherwise, Sancho would kick her out of the house, regardless of the late hour, until she brought him his drink. "Oh, Sancho, what are you doing to yourself?" Nadi lamented. "You're not young anymore, you're ruining your health." "Quiet, you fool," her husband replied gruffly. "Alcohol drowns my sins, and it's the only thing that can do it. Pour me a drink." His wife obediently poured a shot of the strong liquor into a glass, knowing that refusing would only lead to a scandal. 2 years passed. This Saturday evening was no different from all the others. Sancho was relaxing in the kitchen with a bottle of strong liqueur, while Nadi prepared something at the stove. Viola would be back from work soon, and they needed to feed her. "Sancho, why don't you do something else?" "Maybe watch some TV," Nadi suggested. "TV? What's there to watch?" "Just soap operas and nonsense," Sancho grumbled. "You tell me, will our daughter keep mourning that baby for the rest of her life? It's high time she got married. How long can she rely on us?" "She's not relying on us. She's earning her own living," Nadi replied to her husband's complaints. "So independent. Women need a man, otherwise, they'll lose themselves completely," Sancho scoffed. "All women are the same, worthless chickens." He downed his shot, grimaced slightly, and took a bite of a pickled cucumber. From the hallway, he heard the sound of the door opening. A minute later, Viola entered the kitchen, accompanied by a young man who appeared to be about 5 years older than her. "Mom, Dad, let me introduce you to Valerio. We're planning to live together," Viola announced, taking her parents by surprise. "Hello," Valerio greeted them. Sancho and Nadi looked at Viola and then at Valerio. They hadn't expected this from their daughter. Nadi had assumed that Viola wasn't dating anyone and certainly wasn't planning to get married. "When did this happen?" "Well, hello." Sancho extended his hand to the young man. "Come on in and take a seat at the table. Mom, set the table for dinner and pour our guest a drink. We have to talk." The family started eating. Nadi placed plates on the table and served pasta with patties. She sat down herself. Viola ate in silence, her eyes cast downward. It seemed as though she was indifferent to everything happening at that moment. "So, cheers, we've got to get to know each other," Sancho proposed, raising his glass, and Valerio followed suit, downing his drink in one gulp. "And how long have you two been dating?" Sancho asked. "It's been a week, Dad," Viola replied, poking at her plate with her fork. Quite a time." Sancho scratched the back of his head and poured another drink from the bottle. Have you decided on a wedding? We won't have it, his daughter replied. Why not? He asked. We decided there's no need to spend money and feed a bunch of strangers at a wedding, the new fiancé chimed in. People hardly give meaningful gifts nowadays, except maybe for dishware and bedding. So why gather a crowd of useless people? You have already calculated everything, haven't you? Sancho grew irritated. And you think it's normal to live together without a wedding? Quite normal, Valerio replied, taking another sip. No, naughty, just look at what they're doing. Sancho continued his outrage, thoroughly intoxicated now. I'll get chewed out at the factory for marrying off my daughter and not inviting them in. So, you should invite them. Sancho, you should introduce our future happy life to your colleagues, the young man suggested. Go have a drink with them somewhere and eat something. But what does it have to do with us? Who are they to us? Sancho scrutinized his future son-in-law closely and then slammed his fist on the table so hard that the plates jumped and Valerio's empty glass tipped over, rolling onto the floor. Naughty hurried to grab a broom and dustpan to clean up the mess. Quiet, he bellowed. Here, I decide who's involved and who isn't. Calm down, Sancho, Naughty tried to soothe her husband, realizing that this spark of anger could lead to a serious argument. It wouldn't take much for the future son-in-law and father-in-law to come to blows. Sancho took another drink, calmed down, and continued the conversation. So, where are you planning to live? Dad, Valerio has his own one-bedroom apartment, Viola replied. It seemed she had no emotions at all. She didn't react to her father's disapproval. She was indifferent. Viola calmly got up from the table, poured coffee, and placed it in front of Valerio and Sancho. You'd better have some coffee, otherwise, you'll both get too drunk, she remarked. Well, you have a place to live. Good, Sancho approved. And where do you work? Not at the factory, I hope. No, I'm sorry, the factory isn't my thing, Valerio replied. I have a stall at the market where I sell various goods. I travel to the capital, buy cheaper, and sell at a higher price. A peddler, is that it? Sancho interjected. Why do you call it like that? Valerio countered. I'm an entrepreneur. Oh, I see. Sancho waved his hand dismissively. He fell silent for a moment and then, in a more conciliatory tone, asked, Do you love each other? Sancho, love isn't the most important thing today, Valerio replied. It's much more important for a husband and wife to trust each other, support each other, and earn money. In the old days, girls used to get married without any love, and everything was fine. Strong, close-knit families had farms and prosperity. Hey, don't mix things up, Sancho said, pointing his index finger forward. In the old days, the parents of the grooms used to pick brides for the girls, but we don't know anything about you. Nothing. And now, we're supposed to let our daughter marry you? Valerio leaned back in his chair and smiled mischievously. Well, ask away. I'll answer any questions. Sancho picked up the empty bottle and looked at it. Naughty, bring more to drink, he ordered Naughty. Maybe that's enough, Sancho. Tomorrow you'll have a headache, and you'll be running for a hangover cure, the woman tried to dissuade her husband. I said, bring it. He glared at his wife, and she hurried to the room to fetch another bottle secretly stored in the closet. It was already dark outside. The clock hands were approaching midnight, and the gathering continued. Viola stood against the wall, watching her father and Valerio discuss her future while occasionally taking sips from their glasses. Naughty was concerned, constantly replenishing the snacks. Finally, her father, now with a thick tongue, said, Do whatever you want, live your life. I can see that this young man is serious and thinks sensibly. You two do as you please, but your mother and I will have a festive dinner at home at least. Sounds good. We don't mind, and we'd be glad to join you for a bit, Valerio agreed. Right, Viola? Viola shrugged. She didn't care. Saying their goodbyes, the future son-in-law and father-in-law hugged each other for a long time in the hallway, holding onto each other for support, barely standing and clutching the walls. That's how they engaged, and Viola became a fiancée. A month later, about 20 people gathered in their apartment. At the table sat the men from Sancho's workplace, including his workshop supervisor, who, thanks to his connections at the Registro Civil, facilitated the speedy marriage. There were some distant relatives of Nadi, and that was it. After sitting with the guests for politeness' sake and sharing a couple of kisses amid shouts of bitter, Viola and Valerio retreated to the groom's apartment. After they closed the door behind them, a slightly inebriated Sancho loudly declared, "Now no one will dare say that my daughter is a loose girl who got pregnant by some unknown guy. She's a married woman now. That's it." The capital greeted a new day. The thoroughfares, streets, and boulevards gradually came to life, filling up with cars and people rushing somewhere. The warm summer rain that had fallen during the night had settled the dust on the road, which had been scorching under the hot summer sun. Descending from her bedroom, Olivia made her way down the stairs. "Good morning, Olivia," greeted the housekeeper, Alina. "Shall I make coffee for you?" "Don't worry, Alina, I'll do it myself." "Is Narciso Alvarez still at home?" "Yes, he's having breakfast in the dining room," replied the girl. "All right." Olivia walked into the dining room, where her husband was finishing his cheesecakes, carefully prepared by Alina. The young woman had been working in the Alvarez house for 5 years now. She completely satisfied the needs of the homeowners. She was kind, calm, very clean, and industrious. She helped Olivia maintain the large mansion and, at times, provided company, engaging in conversation and lending her ear to her mistress. The spouses had long realized that they made the right choice when they hired the country girl. She not only cooked wonderfully, but also knew how to keep a secret, ensuring that nothing that happened inside the house leaked beyond the high brick fence. "Good morning, dear," Olivia kissed her husband on the cheek. "Are you leaving already?" "Yes, my love, I have a lot to do today," Narciso replied, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "I scheduled a morning meeting, and then I'm heading to the department." "Will you be back late, as usual?" Olivia asked, looking disappointed. "I'll try not to be late." He got up from the table, hugged his wife, kissed her, and headed for the exit. "Goodbye. Don't miss me." She watched out of the window as her husband's black SUV drove through the gates. Then, she prepared coffee and called for the housekeeper. "Alina, do you have a lot to do today?" she asked the girl. "Same as usual, Olivia." "Well, you have a lot to do today, and so does Narciso. I, on the other hand, have a completely free day. How about we go to the shopping center?" Alina let out a barely noticeable sigh. Another trip to the shopping center. For the past 2 years, Olivia had been constantly going there. She didn't need any new things. The mistress visited the children's play area. She simply sat at a small cafe table for hours, watching the kids brought here to play by their parents. Olivia and Narciso had been in love with each other since their college days. After graduating, they got married. Thanks to the support of Narciso's parents, his career quickly took off. He soon assumed the position of his father, the CEO of a large metal processing company. He inherited it when his father decided to retire and enjoy the peace and quiet of their country house by the river. Olivia had no need to work. She dedicated her time to her passion, pottery. In their garden, a small cottage was built for her, serving as a workshop where she crafted impressively beautiful items by hand: cups, pitchers, vases, plates, and more. The family was affluent and could afford anything they desired. However, for the past 10 years, Olivia and Narciso have been struggling in vain to have a child. All their attempts had been unsuccessful. Olivia suffered the most from her inability to conceive. She increasingly frequented the shopping center, where she couldn't tear her gaze away from other people's children. Among them could have been her own child. Olivia, why are you breaking your heart like this? Alina exclaimed, throwing up her hands. I can see that these trips don't calm you down but only upset you even more. Let's tidy up the flower bed instead. The roses have withered and need pruning. The gardener will come after lunch and take care of everything, Olivia replied. Well, how about going to the pottery studio then? I don't have the inspiration, Alina. Olivia placed an empty cup on the table. I'll be ready soon. Half an hour later, they were already heading towards the city center. In Olivia's bag, there were several chocolates and candies. She distributed them to children at the shopping center. After spending about 3 hours at the children's play area, the women headed back home. On the way, they made a stop at a church where Alina, the homeowner, spent a long time in prayer. She felt deeply sorry for Olivia. She would make the best, caring mother, Alina thought, watching Olivia exit the church. It's Narciso, I'm listening. Narciso, hi. A partner's voice sounded on the other end of the line. How are you doing? Oh, Silvio Santos? Hello there. Narciso was pleased with the call from his friend and business partner, but he immediately felt a chill run down his spine. Everything's fine. Why are you calling? Has something happened? Any problems at the factory? No, don't worry, the voice on the other end of the line hurried to reassure him. I have some news for you. I hope it will make you happy. Tell me. Do you remember when you visited our orphanage for a charitable contribution? Of course. Do you remember Marina Fernandez? The director of the orphanage? IFO. How could I forget? She's such a striking woman, Narciso chuckled. Well, yesterday she called me. She said she has a boy there who fits the description of what you wanted, blue-eyed, fair-haired. True, he's not very healthy, but that's only because there's no proper medical care in the orphanage. He's a very clever boy for his age. How old is the boy? Narciso inquired, feeling his heart pounding wildly. He's 2 years old. He was left in the maternity ward right after birth. There's a release for adoption, so there won't be any issues. Currently, a family is considering adopting him. However, Marina Fernandez remembered you. She said that this family won't provide a good life for the boy, and if anyone should take him, it should be you and Olivia, Silvio explained. Silvio, tell the director of the orphanage not to take any action. I'll call you back tomorrow, Narciso responded. All right, I'll be waiting. Narciso hung up the phone and started to contemplate the situation. The family had thought about adopting a child, but Olivia wanted to adopt a baby, and now they were offered a 2-year-old child with an already developed personality. In any case, he had to tell his wife about Silvio's call. Narciso picked up his mobile phone and dialed Olivia's number. Olivia, are you home? He asked. I'm on my way back from the city. I'll be home in half an hour. Why? Olivia replied. We need to talk. I'm on my way home. Did something happen, Narciso? Olivia became anxious. No, my dear. We'll talk when I get home. Narciso ended the call, placed the documents in the safe, and left his office. I won't be at the office for the rest of the day. Cancel all my meetings, he instructed his secretary. When Narciso arrived home, Olivia greeted him. He rarely left work in the middle of the day, and she could sense that something was amiss, something he couldn't discuss over the phone. Narciso, you got me worried, she said, embracing her husband. Do you have problems at work? Why did you come back all of a sudden? Actually, I have news that we need to discuss urgently, he replied. Silvio called. What is it? Are there any problems? No, everything's fine. He called about something else. Let's go inside, Narciso said, leading his wife by the hand. They settled in the living room, where Alina brought them coffee and placed it on the table. Olivia looked at Narciso attentively, awaiting the news. Tell me, have you completely given up on the idea of adopting a child? He asked quietly, locking eyes with his wife. Narciso, did you come home in the middle of the workday just to ask me that? Olivia responded, her eyes filled with confusion, surprise, and uncertainty. We could talk about it this evening, Olivia suggested. No, we can't. Silvio Santos called. There's a boy in the orphanage. He said he's very clever and cute, Narciso explained. My goodness, Narciso, no matter which orphanage you go to, there's always a clever and cute boy. Olivia exclaimed. Why there? I don't know, Olivia. But when Silvio told me that the director of the orphanage wanted to see us specifically, my heart started pounding very hard for some reason. I got worried, and I really wanted to talk to you. The thing is, there's a family from this town considering adopting him. You know it's a province where the child won't have a good education or prospects. He'll grow up in a working-class family. What can she provide for him? So, you want to be responsible for someone else's child? Is that all you want? Olivia snapped. You've misunderstood me. I want to raise a son. I want to give him the best of everything, including my love and fatherly care. Don't you want the same? But we wanted a baby, Olivia protested. Olivia, 2 years old, is still very young. We can raise him as our own. He will be our family, and he'll never know he was adopted. Olivia stood up and walked to the window. Her gaze fell on the lawn and the garden, where their son could have played. When do we need to go? She asked without turning around. As soon as possible, her husband replied. I'll call the airport and book the tickets. The next morning, they set off to meet the boy who might become their son. In the director's office at the orphanage, Marina Fernandez, Olivia, and Narciso were sitting nervously. Please, don't worry so much, Olivia. They'll bring Pancho in shortly. Would you like some coffee? Marina offered. But the visitors from the capital declined. They were eager to meet the child. Then let me tell you a bit about Pancho, Marina said as she took out the boy's file. Pancho was left in the maternity ward. His mother, a 16-year-old named Viola Sanz, wrote a release for adoption. The child was born premature and needed medical attention for a month. Then he was transferred to the city's children's hospital, as per the procedure. After that, he happened to be with us. I'll never understand how someone can abandon their own child, a child they carried in their womb for so long, Olivia said sadly. There are different circumstances, Olivia, the director explained. Not everyone is ready for motherhood. In such cases, it's better to let strangers raise the child than a reluctant mother. Yes, I agree, Olivia sighed. But won't his mother look for her son later on? She still hasn't shown up, Marina replied. We're in constant contact with the maternity ward. That's where the babies come from. But no one has inquired about Pancho. Pancho. Who gave him that name? Narciso asked. We did, the director replied and then quickly added, but if you don't like it, you can change the documents. You have that right. We'll think about it, the man said. The carer entered the room, holding the boy's hand. He was dragging a toy car on a string behind him. The Alvarez couple watched the child closely. He had light hair and beautiful blue eyes. Pancho looked like a character from a children's book, as if he had stepped right out of its pages. Olivia decided to address the child first. Hello. What's your name? She asked, squatting down next to the child. Pancho, the boy replied. The child wasn't afraid of the strange lady. I'm Olivia, and this is Narciso, she said. The boy turned his gaze towards the man. How old are you, Pancho? Olivia asked. The boy extended his hand, splaying 2 fingers wide, and loudly said, 2. The adults present burst into laughter. It was quite amusing to see the child confidently declare his age. Pancho took a step forward and handed Olivia the toy car. Do you like playing with cars? she asked. I do, the boy replied loudly once again. How about we go to a place where there are lots and lots of cars, and they will all be yours? Olivia suggested. Pancho nodded eagerly. He wasn't afraid of the adults who were watching him attentively. He seemed straightforward and self-assured. Olivia couldn't help but think that if she had met him under different circumstances, she would have never guessed that his mother left him alone and that he was growing up in an orphanage. Her perception of orphans was completely different. When Pancho was taken away, Narciso and Olivia exchanged glances. In their 10 years of marriage, they hardly ever argued. Their opinions on various matters were remarkably aligned. They have aligned again now. In Narciso's eyes, it read, "This is our boy." And Olivia's gaze conveyed, "We will love him more than life itself." Back at home, they began preparing to become Pancho's parents. Narciso instructed the lawyers to gather and formalize all the necessary documents and handle the legal intricacies of the boy's new home. Olivia, on the other hand, was almost losing her mind with anticipation, knowing that she would finally have a son. Alina, tidy up the bedroom next to ours today. Tell the security guard to remove all the furniture from there. We'll buy everything new. Wash and clean everything, including the windows. We'll need to do the renovations very quickly. This will be Pancho's room. All right, Olivia, I'll take care of it. We need to find a good team of renovators, Olivia said thoughtfully. The next day, interior designers were already working in the child's room, while Olivia was in the living room with one of the capital's top interior designers. The young man, stylishly dressed in a blazer with a braid in his hair, was showing possible designs on paper. Olivia had called him yesterday, urgently requesting a design project and interior decoration for the child's room. The young man had worked all night, and now he proudly and a little nervously presented the options to his client. I like this one, Olivia handed the designer a sheet with a soft, pale blue room. Excellent choice. Lots of light, space, and air. Only, Olivia, all the furniture here will be custom made, and that will take some time. How much time do you need? The woman interrupted. I think about a month. I'll give you 2 weeks. Everything must be ready by that time. Understood, the young man's voice didn't sound very confident. Alejandro, if you need extra payment for speed, name any amount. The main thing is that the room should be ready by the time our son arrives. I understand, Olivia. I'll do it. For 2 weeks, while lawyers and designers were fulfilling the Alvarez requests, Olivia raced around stores and shopping centers. Alina, get ready. We're going to the city, she would say, barely managing to drink a cup of coffee in the morning. Olivia, why do we need to spend so much time in the city every day? We can order everything online, the housekeeper tried to resist. You don't understand, Alina. I want to choose everything myself. I want to be the first to hold the toys and things that will belong to Pancho. Alina sighed and followed her to the car, once again heading to the shopping centers, where Olivia cleared the shelves of toys, sweaters, suits, t-shirts, and little boots, everything that stirred up a storm of emotions in her. And after 2 weeks, Narciso set off to bring Pancho home. Olivia tried to wait at home, feeling restless. She was afraid that the boy might not like his new parents or that their relationship might not work out. Pushing doubts aside, she tried to imagine the happy days they would spend as a family, trips to the sea, teaching the little one to ski and skate. When her husband called from the airport and said they had arrived and were on their way home, Olivia went out to the garden. It was beautifully decorated with balloons and lanterns. On the lawn, there was a large red battery-powered Jeep, and next to it was a 3-wheeled bicycle. Do you think Pancho will like it, Alina? The hostess asked the young woman. Don't worry, Olivia. You and Narciso will be the best parents in the world, don't doubt it. The time until her husband and Pancho arrived seemed to drag on endlessly. Finally, Narciso's car pulled into the driveway. Olivia headed towards her husband and the boy, who was holding Narciso's hand. Hello, Pancho. "Do you remember me?" Olivia asked. "I do," the boy replied, nodding. "You're my good boy." The woman hugged the child with tears of joy in her eyes. At that moment, she felt like she was embracing her happiness and was ready to do everything to ensure Pancho had a wonderful childhood. To everyone's surprise, the boy easily integrated into the family. He never threw tantrums, was curious, and eagerly participated in all the activities the adults were involved in. He constantly hung around Alina in the kitchen, and she kept making delicious cottage cheese pancakes, dumplings, and apple pies for him. In the garden, Pancho attracted the attention of the security guard and the gardener with his games. He skillfully drove his jeep along the paths, chasing the fleeing employees. In the winter, they turned the lawn into an ice rink for Pancho. Narciso and Olivia taught the boy how to skate, and then they all enjoyed hot coffee with delicious almond cookies together. The couple was happy. They had found what had been missing in their lives. When Pancho called Narciso Dad, the man didn't even try to hide his tears of joy. Grabbing the boy in his arms, he was running around the garden, repeating, "Say it again. Say what you called me." 3 years passed. The family celebrated their son's 5th birthday in grand style. They invited the children of friends and partners over. They organized a cheerful picnic right in the garden, generously decorated with balloons. Clowns and stilt walkers entertained the children, and on the terrace, with the arrival of each new guest, a mountain of colorful gift boxes grew. Pancho was happy. Olivia and Narciso greeted guests who never tired of saying, "You have a wonderful son." The waiters served glasses of champagne and snacks. At the end of the celebration, fireworks lit up the sky above the Alvarez garden, delighting the young guests. When the guests had all departed, Narciso put Pancho to bed himself. Before getting into bed, his son made him promise that they would unwrap the presents together tomorrow. After tucking his son in with a soft blanket, Narciso left the child's room and went downstairs to the living room. Olivia was sitting in an armchair, rubbing her temples with her fingers. "Are you feeling unwell, dear?" Narciso asked. "I have a headache, and I feel dizzy," his wife complained. "I probably drank more champagne than I should have. I was just so excited." "Are you sure?" "Yes, I'll take a pill now and go to sleep. Everything will be fine in the morning. Let's go to the bedroom." However, Olivia didn't feel better in the morning. Narciso postponed all his appointments and took his wife to the hospital. This day would be etched in his memory forever. The doctor who had been monitoring the Alvarez family's health came out to speak with Narciso with a mysterious expression on his face. "What's wrong with her?" Narciso asked. "Is she ill?" "Not at all," the doctor smiled. "She's perfectly healthy, just a little bit pregnant. Olivia is about 5 to 6 weeks pregnant, but we should conduct a more thorough examination." Olivia emerged from the doctor's office and approached her husband, looking into his eyes attentively. "My love, the Lord has rewarded us for giving Pancho happiness and a family. Now he will have a little brother or sister." 8 months later, the Alvarez family welcomed a daughter they named Estefania. When Viola married Valerio, she didn't have high expectations. She didn't love him, but he wasn't repulsive either. The young man had his own small business, a stall at the clothing market, and a small apartment, and he was reasonably good-looking. Viola had grown tired of seeing her alcoholic father every day, spouting nonsense, arguing, and causing endless trouble for her and her mother. She was also tired of seeing her mother's face filled with pity for her. Viola needed to start a new life and learn to live independently. That's when Valerio appeared in her life. The young man was a regular customer at the supermarket where Viola worked. He immediately noticed the new girl at the cash register. Valerio went out of his way to catch her attention, paid her compliments, and one day after the store closed, he invited her for a walk. To her own surprise, Viola agreed. During their walk, Valerio couldn't stop talking, while Viola remained mostly silent, occasionally responding with one-word answers. To her own amazement, she noticed that Valerio was a very cheerful guy, the type people would call a joker or a walking joke book. They started seeing each other occasionally, mostly with Valerio escorting Viola home after work. Sometimes, he would disappear for a few days or even a week, claiming he was going out of town for business. Viola assumed he was dealing with his merchandise. One day, as Valerio said goodbye to Viola at her building's entrance, he said, "I feel very comfortable with you. Let's live together," Valerio proposed. Together? Like siblings, like neighbors, or perhaps like husband and wife? Viola sarcastically asked. Which option do you prefer? Valerio seemed a bit offended that she didn't take his words seriously. "Oh, come on, don't be upset," Viola said. Soon, they met Viola's parents and announced their intention to become a new family unit. A month later, they were married. Initially, Viola found joy in her life with Valerio. Her husband was fun to be around, and they were always going out, whether to the movies, cafes, or picnics. Months passed quickly. Viola left her job at the supermarket and started selling goods at Valerio's market stall. Why pay a salesperson when you can sell the stuff yourself? You won't cheat yourself, and all the money stays at home, her husband convinced her. Viola succumbed to his persuasion but regretted it during her first winter. The harsh cold forced her to wear layers of clothing and wrap herself in scarves and shawls just to avoid freezing while standing all day in the market stall. "Just wait a little. We'll save some money, and we'll rent space in a shopping center," Valerio tried to persuade her. But to Viola, it felt like winter would never end, and the money would never accumulate. To keep warm in the cold, she started drinking. "Here, warm yourself up," a neighbor from a nearby stall once handed her a flask of vodka. "Take a sip, and you'll feel warm all over." Soon, Viola was going to work with a similar flask in her purse. One day, when she returned home after work, she found her husband in the kitchen. On the table, there was nothing but a bottle of alcohol and a shot glass. "Valerio, why are you without snacks?" "You can't drink without snacks, it's not right," Viola asked. "Your stomach will suffer." Viola's speech was beginning to slur slightly. She opened the fridge, took out some sausage, and placed it in front of her husband. "You're probably hungry. You won't warm up without food." A pot of soup appeared on the stove. "What's the occasion for your feast today, my dear husband? Why are we having a banquet?" Viola asked with a smirk. Valerio raised his bleary eyes to her and slammed his fist on the table. Viola jumped in surprise. "What's wrong?" she asked, startled. "You're a lying, wretched woman," Valerio shouted. Valerio got up from his chair. He seemed to be enraged. "What's wrong, Valerio? What's going on?" Viola stepped back. "You've been deceiving me all along," her husband said, and it was evident that a scandal was imminent. "I thought you were modest, quiet, and decent. But as it turns out, from your school days, you were fooling around with men, and not just fooling around, but even carrying a child from an unknown man. Wretch!" A hot slap across her face instantly sobbed Viola. She clutched her cheek, stinging from the blow, and looked at her husband with fear. Her fear turned into hurt, which eventually brought tears. Viola locked herself in the bathroom and cried for an hour. When she emerged, her husband was sleeping right at the kitchen table, his head resting on his arms. The young woman couldn't understand what she had done wrong or what had happened. Was she to blame for her child's death? However, lately, Viola has been thinking more and more about the child. She felt as though she could hear his voice and laughter. Sometimes, the boy even appeared in her dreams, calling out, "Mom." Viola's married life was turning into a nightmare. Gossips from acquaintances and neighbors influenced Valerio, and he started treating her poorly. Every time someone found out who his wife was, they felt obliged to open his eyes to Viola's true character. They painted her as far from the good, decent woman he thought she was. She had walked around with a belly during school, and yet she had not given birth to a child. The rumors and gossip fueled a burning anger within Valerio and wounded his pride. He began drinking more frequently. One evening, Viola sat across from him at the table and poured another shot. "Pour me a drink, we need to talk, once and for all," she said with a calm yet determined voice. Valerio looked closely at his wife and then poured from the bottle. "Speak, if it's necessary. What happened to me in school shouldn't affect our lives now. That chapter has already turned, and the past remains in the past. If living with me is unpleasant for you, I'll leave. Why didn't you tell me about it yourself? What was there to say? That I gave birth, and the child died at the maternity hospital? Tell me, was it necessary for you to know? Would it have changed anything?" "It would have changed a lot, Viola," Valerio yelled. "A lot. At the very least, I wouldn't have looked like a fool in the eyes of other people. Everyone knew everything in this town except me. Why did you do this to me? I didn't think it would matter to you. I thought you married me, not the rumors you hear now. I won't apologize to you. I haven't done anything wrong. Life taught me a lesson, and I've learned it. What do you say? Should I leave?" Valerio took another drink and poured one for Viola. A single tear ran down his cheek. Just one, but it was a large one. Viola felt sorry for her husband. She got up from the table, walked behind him, and embraced him. That evening, they avoided having a serious quarrel, but the lives of the married couple started to unravel. Valerio began drinking heavily, stopped tending to the market stall, and neglected to restock the inventory, and their income dwindled month by month. After 5 years, he had to close the business entirely. For another year, Viola and Valerio drank bitter liquor almost every day. At times, Valerio brought his alcoholic friends to the apartment, which led to fights, shouting, and the displeasure of their neighbors. Gradually, all their savings were squandered. Furniture and belongings started being sold off by the man in search of his next drink. During rare moments of clarity, Viola would entertain thoughts of putting an end to this lifestyle. She would send the guests away and restore order in the house. Her still somewhat muddled mind urged her, "Stop drinking, get yourself together, change your life." But Valerio always demanded a drink, and the cycle would begin anew. This vicious cycle would have continued indefinitely if not for one incident that turned Viola's life around. She was once again returning from the store, carrying a bottle in her bag. Valerio was waiting at home, but she didn't want to go to his apartment. Viola sat down on a bench in the little park. Yellow leaves were gently falling from the trees. It was one of those beautiful autumn days poets often write about, a golden autumn. Viola was pondering whether she had made a mistake by leaving her job at the supermarket, taking up work at the market, and marrying Valerio. Unexpectedly, a tall man in a gray coat sat down next to her. "Autumn is not a reason to be sad," he remarked, either addressing Viola or simply thinking out loud. Viola turned to look at him. The man had a kind face with eyes that sparkled, surrounded by wrinkles in the corners. "Maybe," she replied, "but there are plenty of other reasons." "Quite a few." The stranger smiled. "More than enough." For some reason, Viola wanted to talk to this man. She wanted someone to sympathize with her. The stranger seemed to understand this. "Enrique Arias," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Viola," she replied. His warm handshake stirred an emotion in her soul, a strange tremor that Viola couldn't quite understand. "You know, Viola," he began, "when my wife passed away, leaving me alone with our daughters in this world, I also started seeking solace in what's now in your bag." The man noticed Viola's surprised expression. "Yes, don't be surprised. I saw you coming out of the store," he continued. Viola fidgeted on the bench. She felt uncomfortable that someone had exposed her drinking habit so effortlessly. She had always tried to hide her drinking from neighbors and acquaintances, and this man had easily uncovered her weakness. My daughters were 5 and 3 years old back then, Enrique continued. They were truly suffering because their mother wasn't with them. Meanwhile, I pitied myself. It wasn't until I realized that I could lose my daughters and be entirely alone that I looked at the world differently. I understood that alcohol wasn't the solution. You should live for those who love you and who believe in you. So, it seems there's no one for me to live for, Viola replied. No one loves me, and no one has hope. She sighed, lowering her head. If only her little one were alive, she would definitely have a reason to live. But now, what was the point of living for a husband who had lost all self-control and cared only about drinking? You are mistaken. You simply don't see anything around you in the state you're in, Enrique countered calmly. What is there to see? A husband who's constantly drunk. I know him inside out, Viola replied. When I get home, Valerio will be drunk again, and I'll have to take care of him. Right? If you want, you can do it that way, but you can also do it differently, Enrique replied. You're a young, beautiful woman. Why do you let your life go to waste? It's not even a life, Viola said. She found it increasingly interesting to talk to Enrique. She had understood it all herself, but all this time, she hadn't found any support. It's more like mere existence. And you, have you stopped drinking completely? I mean, after your wife passed away? Why do you think so? The man replied. On holidays, I allow myself a drink with a good meal. I love barbecue with red wine or a little brandy. It's sacred. Nature in all its splendor, a campfire, glowing coals, and the aroma of sizzling meat. How can you not have a little sip then? Yes, Viola smiled. I haven't been to a barbecue in ages. Would you like to go with me? Enrique suggested. Why? Viola felt awkward, as if she were imposing herself on this kind man. Look, the weather is wonderful, Enrique said. I've missed outings in nature myself. Come on, trust me, you need this right now. All right, Viola hesitated. Let's do it. Agreed. Tomorrow at 1 p.m., we'll meet here and head to the river. Enrique stood up and extended his hand to Viola. Until tomorrow. See you, she replied with a smile. Enrique turned and walked along the path. Viola watched the remarkable man for a while, realizing that nothing in life happens by chance. If fate had unexpectedly led her to him, it must have been a sign. On the way home, Viola, without even realizing it, was smiling. It had been a long time since she felt so light and peaceful. When she returned home, even Valerio, disheveled and wearing a torn shirt and pants with stretched out knees due to drunkenness, couldn't spoil her mood. Placing a bottle in front of him, Viola said loudly, "Here, have a drink." "And you?" "Come, join me," her husband mumbled. "You're out of your mind." Viola locked herself in the bathroom and stood under the shower for a long time. She felt like the warm water jets were refreshing her, washing away the traces of past troubles. The next day, dressed in jeans and a jacket, she headed to the park, where Enrique was already waiting for her. Next to him were two teenage girls. "Meet Viola, Claudia, and Alba, my daughters," the man introduced his daughters. "Nice to meet you," she replied. They headed to the river and found a cozy spot. Enrique set up the barbecue and took out a plastic bucket of marinated meat, bread, and vegetables from his backpack. "All right, girls, I'll cook the meat, and you handle everything else. Sounds good?" he asked, addressing Viola and his daughters. "Of course, Dad," the older one, Alba, replied. Viola noticed that Enrique's daughters were very capable. They skillfully sliced cucumbers and tomatoes, arranging them on disposable plastic plates. "Do you work with Dad?" Claudia asked. "No," Viola replied. "We've met recently." "That's interesting," Alba looked at her father's new acquaintance with curiosity. "We thought you were a professor too. Is your dad a professor, then?" Viola asked. Of course he teaches at the university and educates students, Claudia proudly answered. When the barbecue was ready, they all sat down on the spread-out blanket, which served as an improvised table. The picnic was a great success. The girls were polite, even though they didn't show much interest in Viola, which actually made her feel more at ease. Enrique poured Viola some coffee from his thermos. It's with rose hips, he said. I prepare it myself. It's a very nutritious vitamin drink. Thank you, Viola said. You know, I feel so comfortable in your company. It's like I've known you for 100 years. I'm very glad, Enrique replied with a smile. Viola returned home when it was almost completely dark. Where have you been? Did you bring something to drink? Valerio asked, dissatisfied. Go get it yourself if you want. I'm going to bed, Viola replied. She closed the door to her room. For a while, she could still hear her husband grumbling, but then the front door slammed shut. The next day, Viola went to the supermarket where she used to work as a cashier. She was rehired. And after a month, as she was heading home, she saw Enrique near the store. Hello, Viola, he said. Hi, Enrique, the woman smiled. How did you end up here? Actually, I've been waiting for you, he said. Me? Why? Viola wondered. I want to talk to you. They walked along the path in silence. Suddenly, stopping abruptly, Enrique began to speak. He talked about getting older and about never expecting to meet a woman in his life. He mentioned his daughters, who needed a woman's care, and then fell silent. After some thought, he said, Viola, I've been offered a good position in another city. They are providing a spacious apartment. Come with us. What do you mean? Viola didn't quite understand. Just come with me. I'm not asking for anything from you. Just be there. Be my friend and my companion for the rest of my life. He looked into her eyes, hopefully. Viola tried to say something in response, but Enrique covered her mouth with his hand. Don't say anything. You have a week. He handed her a business card. Here's my phone number. If you decide to accept my offer, I'll be very happy. And now, let me take you home. It's late and completely dark. They walked to the entrance in silence. Viola didn't need words. She already understood that she wanted to be with this mature, intelligent, and very wise man. A week later, Viola left with Enrique and his daughters for the regional capital, carrying only one bag of belongings, leaving Valerio in the apartment, soaked in alcohol that never seemed to dry up. In the Alvarez mansion, a festive mood prevailed. Since the arrival of Pancho and Olivia and Narciso's family, 20 years have passed. Over all those years, the couple never once regretted adopting the little boy. They had decided not to reveal the secret of his birth to their son. They loved him with all their hearts, and the boy reciprocated their love. For him, there were no people dearer than his mom and dad, except perhaps his younger sister, Estefania, with whom they were inseparable. When Estefania was just a baby, Pancho could spend hours playing with her. Because of the 5-year age difference, Pancho felt smarter and more authoritative, so he always took Estefania for walks in the garden, read her books, and then taught her how to build a snowman. Estefania always followed her brother. The girl eagerly rushed to the door when Pancho was brought home from school, grabbed his heavy backpack full of textbooks, and dragged it across the floor into the living room. Olivia and Narciso were happy watching their children. I can't even imagine what our lives would be like without Pancho and Estefania, Olivia used to say. In their childhood, both the son and daughter mischieved a lot, which often drove the housekeeper, Elena, to despair. She knew all their secrets and mischievous tricks, but she had a pact with the children. If their pranks went too far, she would immediately report everything to their parents. That's why Pancho always kept an eye on their crazy games. He didn't allow little Estefania to run up and down the stairs, didn't let her go into the backyard alone, and prevented her from entering his mom's pottery workshop when she wasn't there. Estefania was finishing her studies at the high school while Pancho was studying abroad. Today was the day he was supposed to return home for the holidays. On this occasion, Elena was preparing a sumptuous lunch and Pancho's favorite pie. Brother and sister communicated almost every day through video calls, even when they were far apart. Estefania couldn't contain her excitement and spent most of the day hovering around Elena in the kitchen. "When will he arrive?" she asked impatiently. "Just be patient. Narciso has already sent the driver to the airport to pick up Pancho. They'll be here soon." "You better get the festive tableware and set the table," Elena suggested, noticing Estefania's restlessness. When the car entered the courtyard, Estefania rushed to meet her brother. "Pancho!" she exclaimed, throwing herself into his arms. "I'm so happy." "Easy there, crazy girl," Pancho laughed. Olivia and Narciso followed their daughter onto the terrace. Everyone was in high spirits. "So, how was your flight, son?" Narciso asked, hugging Pancho. "Everything was good, Dad," the young man replied. He hugged and kissed his mother, and together they all headed into the house. "Wow, how you've grown," Olivia admired. "Our boy has grown up." "What did you expect? That he'd keep chasing the ball around the yard and secretly steal candies from Elena's kitchen?" Narciso chuckled. "Pancho, what did you bring me?" Estefania asked, sitting down next to her brother. "I'll show you in a moment." The young man reached for his backpack. "Here, take a look. They're really cool. The latest model. We don't have these yet, for sure." He handed his sister a box of wireless headphones, and she squealed with delight. "Olivia, lunch is ready." "I've set the table in the dining room," Elena said, entering the living room. "Everyone, please join me at the table," the woman invited the family. The family spent the whole day at home, enjoying each other's company. The parents couldn't have been happier. Their home was filled with voices, laughter, fun, and joy. Watching their grown-up children goofing around, Olivia was happy. The only thing that cast a shadow over her happiness was her husband's health. Olivia woke up in the middle of the night to her husband's groans. The pain had intensified, and Narciso couldn't bear it anymore. "Calm down, my dear. I'll give you a pill now," Olivia said, getting out of bed. "No need, I already took one." "It's not helping," her husband replied, struggling to breathe. "What should we do?" Olivia found her mobile phone on the nightstand and dialed the emergency number. "I'm calling an ambulance." When the ambulance with doctors arrived in the mansion's courtyard, the whole family was already on their feet. Pancho and Estefania had no idea about their father's illness. The parents had skillfully hidden it from the children to avoid upsetting them. Narciso was taken to the hospital, and his wife went with him. No one in the house slept until the morning. Elena, in her robe and flowery shawl, brewed coffee for the young adults. "Elena, did you know?" Pancho asked the housekeeper. "Did you know that Dad was sick?" "I knew, my dear. But it was strictly forbidden for me to say anything." She placed cups of aromatic coffee in front of the young man and the girl. "Let's hope for the best." "Estefania, we need to go to the hospital," Pancho decisively said. "What, right now?" "As soon as they open the emergency room." The young man finished his coffee and placed the cup on the table. "I'll go take a shower, freshen up, and get dressed." "I'll go with you, okay?" "Of course." Olivia was sitting in the hospital corridor, staring at one spot, her gaze fixed on the flashing sign that read, "Do not enter." "Mom, how's Dad?" Estefania embraced her mother tightly, holding her close. "It's bad, darling, it's bad. But it will be okay, right? They'll help him, won't they?" "I don't know, my dear. We'll have to believe and hope." "Mom, where's the doctor?" "I want to talk to him," Pancho said calmly. The woman sadly gestured towards the end of the corridor. The young man walked decisively to the doctor's office. Knocking on the door, he entered and saw the doctor sitting behind the desk. "Hello, I'm Pancho Alvarez, the son of your patient, Narciso Alvarez." "Have a seat, young man," the doctor offered. "We've just received the results of the examination. Your father is in critical condition. His illness progressed too far. What can we do?" Pancho asked anxiously. "There's one option. We need a donor. But finding one in such a short time won't be easy." "Who can be a donor?" "Theoretically, close relatives and people whose indicators match the patient's." "Then let me be the donor." Pancho jumped up from his chair. "I'm his son, I should be a match." "Your eagerness is commendable, young man, but you need to undergo tests first." "I'm perfectly healthy," the young man hurriedly reassured the doctor. "I understand, but testing is necessary. If you're willing, I'll give you the necessary instructions. You'll have to stay in the hospital." "Of course, I'm ready," Pancho said and walked out into the corridor. He approached his mother and sister. "Mom, Dad needs a donor. Blood relatives are the most likely match. Searching for another donor could take a lot of time. I told them I'd be ready for the surgery." Olivia looked at her son with a gaze clouded by sorrow. There was no hope in her eyes. "No, my son, it's all in vain," she said softly. "It won't work out." "But why?" "I want to help Dad. I'm young, healthy, and I'll recover quickly. But for Dad, it's a matter of life and death right now." "Stop and listen to me," his mother said firmly, wiping away her tears with a handkerchief. "You can't be a donor for your father. You're not related to him by blood." Pancho stood there stunned, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. He couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams that his mother would ever say such words. She added, "You're not our biological child. We adopted you." "What are you saying, Mom?" Estefania asked, frightened. "Are you out of your mind? Maybe we should call a doctor." "It's true, kids. I'll tell you everything at home. It seems the time has come." She was sitting silently on a chair, swaying back and forth, lost in her thoughts. Meanwhile, Pancho was slowly walking down the corridor. He wanted to get some fresh air. His head was spinning from the words that had divided his life into before and after. They say a person can't suffer forever. If God sends trials, suffering, and pain, He will later reward them with happiness, emotional well-being, and material prosperity. That's what happened to Viola. She had to endure a lot of suffering, an endlessly drinking father, a stillborn child she couldn't even bury, and a husband who almost turned her into an alcoholic. But by the will of fate, she met Enrique. An adult, wise, educated, and intelligent man became the closest and dearest person to her in the world. After moving to the big city with Enrique and his daughters, Viola felt like she had escaped from the suffocating swamp of endless misfortunes and disappointments. The family acquired a spacious 3-bedroom apartment. Enrique didn't want her to work, his salary more than covered all their needs. The girls liked Viola. They willingly helped her with lunches and dinners, went shopping together, and Viola took care of their appearance. She was the one to whom Alba and Claudia confided all their secrets. With her, the girls shared their ups and downs at school and their relationships with boys. It was Viola, whom Enrique's youngest daughter confided in, when she fell in love and decided to get married. And when they had the wedding, she thanked her stepmother in front of everyone. "Thank you, Viola, for being with us all these years." Viola and Enrique had lived together for over 20 years. They were the best years of this woman's challenging life. Enrique should have retired long ago, but he couldn't imagine life without his students and continued to teach. "Why should I stay home and not work?" he would tell Viola. "I'll go crazy, I'll turn into an old man, like those who sit with grandmothers on benches in the courtyard." "Why not, Enrique?" Viola would object. She knew that his heart was causing more and more problems, and his blood pressure was constantly fluctuating, requiring daily medication. "We can find some hobbies." We can travel more around the country. There are so many beautiful places. Oh, come on, Viola, Enrique would say, students are my everything. I feel alive and needed when they're around. Enrique died right at work. He had a heart attack during a lecture. Both daughters arrived on the same day to prepare for the funeral. After the memorial service, Alba and Claudia locked themselves in the kitchen. What are we going to do with the apartment? Alba asked her sister. We'll sell it. And until we've inherited it, we can rent it out, Claudia replied. A 3-bedroom apartment in the city center is worth a decent amount. But Viola lives here, Alba said. Viola is nobody here, Claudia interrupted. Our father warmed her up once upon a time. But now he's gone. So let her go back to where she came from. Yeah, Alba was quietly smoking, and then she agreed with her sister. You're probably right. The next day, they packed Viola's things into a bag and pushed her out the door, saying, You don't live here anymore. How can you do this, girls? Where am I supposed to go? The woman asked, bewildered. That's not our concern, Claudia replied, slamming the door in the woman's face, the woman who had once been a mother figure to her and her sister. Viola walked the streets of the big city. In her hand was a large bag with her belongings, and in her coat pocket she had a few banknotes. Life bustled around her, people rushed somewhere, cars raced by at breakneck speed, but in the soul of the woman, aged and gray from sorrow, there was emptiness. There was no life left in her. Viola bought a potato pie and coffee from a street vendor, sat down on a park bench, and stared pensively ahead. How long had she been sitting like this? The woman didn't know. Next to her on the bench was a cup with a cold drink and an untouched pie. Viola hadn't even noticed when night fell over the city. Ma'am, are you okay? Viola heard a voice that seemed to come from the heavens. Wake up. She raised her head. Before her, there was a giant, furry dog's face. Do animals live in heaven or hell, she thought. But then someone's hand touched her shoulder. Can I help you? A female voice asked. Viola saw a stranger holding a large dog on a leash. The woman sat down next to her. What happened to you? Should I call an ambulance? She asked. And then all the emotions, all the grief that had accumulated in Viola's soul, burst out in a torrent of tears. She cried and couldn't calm down. The woman took a small bottle of water from her purse and gave it to Viola. When she finally regained some composure, the stranger said, My name is Katerina. Let's go to my place. It's late, and you can't stay here. She helped Viola to her feet, and Viola obediently followed Katerina. Once again, the Lord sent Viola a savior. The older woman's fate touched Katerina, and she couldn't bear to let her go. She had experienced a lot in her own life. Katerina had 4 children, and her husband died when the youngest was not even a month old. Stay and live with us. We have plenty of space for everyone, Katerina suggested the next morning. At first, Viola resisted, but Katerina persuaded her, saying that she also needed help with the children and that Viola could be like a grandmother to them. So it happened. Katerina's 2 sons and 2 daughters turned out to be remarkably clever and affectionate children. Within a week, they announced to all their friends and neighbors in the courtyard that their grandmother had arrived. Viola baked pies, and the children carried them out to the yard to treat their friends. Soon, everyone in the house knew Viola, greeted her politely, and sometimes invited her to join them for a chat or to pass the time. So unexpectedly, Viola, who seemed destined for loneliness after Enrique's death, found a family, a daughter in the person of Katerina, and 4 grandchildren. Viola had been living with Katerina for over a year. On the morning when the neighbor's boy Pedro rang the doorbell, she surprisingly slept for a long time and woke up only to the sound of thunder. Learning from the boy that someone was looking for Viola, Katerina went downstairs and walked into the courtyard. Who are you? She asked the well-dressed young man standing next to a huge black SUV, staring at the windows of the house. I'm looking for Viola Sans, the young man replied. Does she live here? Perhaps you could introduce yourself and explain what this is about. Katerina asked skeptically. Of course. My name is Pancho Alvarez. Based on all the information I've gathered, there's a high chance that Viola Sans is my mother. Katerina's eyebrows shot up. As far as I know, Viola doesn't have any children. If she lives here, please let me meet her and talk. Only that way can we find out the truth. Katerina scrutinized the man closely. Come with me, she said, heading towards the entrance. 2 security guards followed Pancho, but he stopped them. Wait here. Viola put the kettle on the stove, then sat down at the table, preparing a cup of coffee for herself. Viola noticed that Katerina entered the kitchen with the young man. Viola, I don't understand anything, but this man needs to talk to you. Katerina looked bewildered. I'll leave you alone. No, stay, Katerina, Viola said. Katerina sent the children, who were curiously inspecting the guest, into the other room, closed the door, offered Pancho a seat, and took one herself. The man remained silent, gazing at Viola's face. For some reason, Viola's mouth had gone dry, and she couldn't utter a word. It felt like she had seen this young man somewhere before. There was something familiar about his face, but she couldn't remember where she knew him from. Are you Viola Sans? Pancho finally asked. Yes, Viola replied. My name is Pancho Alvarez. I've been searching for my mother for many years. She left me at the maternity hospital. Katerina and Viola exchanged surprised glances. What could they do to help this man? After a brief pause, Pancho continued his story. I would have never known that I was raised by a foster family. But when my father was on his deathbed, my mother, in a fit of emotion, told me that they had adopted me at a very young age. At first, I was very angry and even left home, but over time, I calmed down and started searching for my mother. All I knew was that I was born to a 16-year-old girl in a small town and left at the maternity hospital immediately after birth. I've imagined 1,000 times how I would find her and say everything I thought about mothers like her. Then I mentally thanked her for my birth because I had a happy, prosperous life, the best mom and dad in the world, and a sister whom I love very much. All my searches were fruitless. The threads led back to the maternity hospital, where there was no one left who remembered that 16-year-old girl. But Pancho got lucky. At the moment Viola was giving birth to him, a very young nurse was working at the maternity hospital. She overheard a conversation between the head doctor and the newborn's grandfather. The grandfather demanded that he be allowed to write a refusal. I am the father, and my daughter is a minor, so I have the right to decide for her, the man loudly stated. The decision of the pregnant girl's father shook the young nurse so much that she remembered this story for the rest of her life. Pancho hired detectives, and they managed to track down this nurse. She was now an adult woman, no longer working at the maternity hospital, but the incident that had so deeply affected her that she could never in her life forget it. This hospital employee had followed the fate of the pregnant girl for a while. She knew that she had been told that the child had died. She also knew that the boy had been sent to the hospital and later to a baby's home. So, these were the clues that helped us finally find you, Pancho concluded. It was then that I realized that my biological mother had no knowledge of my existence. She didn't know that I was alive and well, not dead in that maternity hospital. Pancho fell silent. He looked at Viola. The women were listening silently to the man's story, tears rolling down their cheeks. Viola couldn't believe that her father could have treated her so cruelly. He had long been deceased, and there was no one to ask. Viola's eyes, filled with tears of sorrow and joy at the realization that her son was alive, reflected so much pain and happiness. She wanted to get up and hug her son, but her whole body felt numb. Tears were flowing from Pancho's eyes as well. He had a lump in his throat. Finally, the man swallowed heavily and said confidently, "I found you, Mom. Now we will never be apart."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.